issue. It is a national crisis that demands a national response. Today, we are calling on governments, industry, and all Canadians to increase their efforts and to fully implement the calls to justice for justice. Let's work together to make real changes that will protect and uplift First Nations girls, women, and gender diverse people. Waliwan Walalan, merci. Thank you.
Miigwech Regional Chief will now be calling upon Dwayne Akon, who's our 2SL GGBTQIA plus leader at the Assembly of First Nations, and we're so proud of you. Thank you.
Chief, to get you on. Yaketsu Yosatini, our Klingle Chief hat Yanadi. The stunt carcass nuclear hat to a sow klingelkenach. Goats nachat city and yedi ayachat. Glekayadi kadeshitan dachant ayachat. Hello, everybody. It's good to see all of you. I thought important to use my Indigenous language of my Tlingit people. My name is Dwayne Gastando Coin. I'm the interim co-chair of the 2S Plus Council with the Assembly of First Nations. I wanted to thank the National Chief, the Regional Chief, the Acting Regional Chief, all of you. Thank the Algonquin people whose land we're on today. This month is the Indigenous History Month, but it's also Pride. This is Pride Month. I wear my rainbow proudly. 55 years ago in Stonewall, New York, our people, my queer people, stood up and said enough. And this report is part of that. This report is part of that, of acknowledging what the Two-Spirit people have suffered and continue to suffer to this day here in Canada. So I wanted to honor, as a victim of a gay bashing, I myself almost died. And I also want to acknowledge my friend, Dolan Badger, who was a Cree Two-Spirit who was murdered in Edmonton over 10 years ago. It's for them why we're standing here today. I want to speak today about the urgent need for policing reforms and the critical impact of the First Nations 2S Plus population. I am grateful for the opportunity to share my reflections on the 5th anniversary of the National Inquiry's final report. This day holds significant importance for survivors and their families. June 3rd marks another year since the release of this final report. I remember the hope for change that came with it. While I remain hopeful for the future, there is an urgent need for more decisive action to end the MMIWG 2S Plus crisis once and for all. I would like to thank AFN for inviting me here today to talk about the need for the various reforms to better serve and protect our vulnerable 2S Plus First Nation population. I also want to recognize the Assembly of First Nation and the former National Chief, Roseanne Archibald, who helped establish this 2S Plus Council to give our people a voice in this important organization. 2S LGBTQI plus people face compounded risks due to the intersection of race and gender identity. Policing agencies must understand and address these unique challenges. Survivors and their families must remain at the heart of our efforts to implement the calls for justice. Collaborative approaches involving all levels of government, First Nations, and grassroots organizations are critical to enhancing safety for First Nations women, girls, and 2S Plus peoples. The road ahead to address and prevent gender-based violence is long and challenging, but the collective effort, we can make progress step by step. Little progress has been made to support 2S LGBTQIA plus youth programs, with some provinces even taking steps backward. We need funding commitments for youth leadership, development, and mentorship, as well as support for prevention initiatives addressing self-harm and suicide among 2S plus youth. While some funding has been available, there is no consistent long-term core funding for 2S LGBTQI plus grassroots initiatives. We need commitments to create 2S plus specific and safe cultural space. Little progress has been made in ensuring the safety of 2S plus peoples within the policing context. Although some police services offer training on 2S plus issues, these are not universally available and are not mandatory. Hate crimes related to sexual orientation continue to rise, and many 2S plus individuals do not report violence due to mistrust of the police. We just recently had CSIS issued a warning about threats of violence against Pride celebrations. This is where we've come in this country. We also got to talk about hate crimes that are supported by different governments at different levels when it comes to stripping away our rights as 2S people and taking away our charter rights and our rights that existed long before there was a Canadian charter. The journey to justice and safety for First Nations 2S LGBTQI plus individuals is long and challenging, but we must persist. Urgent action is needed to address the MMIWG 2S plus crisis. Out of there's 32 calls for justice for 2S plus peoples, not one has been implemented. So I wanted to bring that to your attention here today as well. And I also wanted to acknowledge the chair of the 2S Plus Council, an amazing young leader from Saskatchewan, Tyler George, who couldn't be with us here today. So Atlangal Chish, Jimigwech, merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our remarks. Is there any questions, comments? Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Hi, Michel Comte with Agence France Presse. You mentioned the two calls for actions that have been implemented. Can you say what those are?
Yeah, there was, my staff are here, I think. Where are we? Do we know the exact two? Kelly?
Justice.
Related to justice, sorry.
Yeah, they're related to justice.
In your view, why is it taking so long to implement these calls for justice? As you noted, there's more than 200, and only 2 have been fully implemented. So what's...
I think it's political will, right? I know that we've had a focus on, say, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We've seen many of those come through and be done, and we're thankful for that. Although we always have a long way to go, but I think on this report, it's almost like it was written, and it kind of. It falls flat, and we need more political will to get that done from across governments, industries, provincial governments included. And we need to start pushing and focusing on something like policing, for instance, for First Nations. It's always such a hard issue, and I know that that's been certainly one of my priorities when I started out on this role. And it's been very tough to get through. And even though there has been commitments by words, I think that we need more than commitments. We need action, and we need, we need that table set up on policing, for instance, for First Nations. That was one of the biggest pieces that we see. And we've seen it in the Auditor General's report a couple of months ago as well. That showed that there was huge gaps in that and in housing on First Nations communities. So big gaps to fill. I know that those numbers are not always easy to talk about. AFN had just released a report that shows, we need $349 billion to close the infrastructure gaps that First Nations face in this country. And that means that our kids aren't having access to simple things like the internet, or access to good roads, crumbling schools. And this is a big population in this country. Although there's only 41 million Canadians, we can't leave anybody behind, including First Nations and First Nations children, who are the fastest growing segment of the Canadian population.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Yeah.
In reference to why do you think there's no productivity in this? The government seems to have this tendency to give us the money we need to have these reports and all the work done, but the commitment's not there after the report comes out. So if anything, they're wasting money. They want to give us the money to do the reports, but there's no money to commit to make the change. Thank you.
If I can, my name's Sheldon Kent, but to answer your question, you know what it is? It's racism. We have to end that the racism in this country. We're all human beings, all of us. We all want to have that good life. Minobataziwan, that's how we say in our language, that's that good life. But there's we need policy change, we need people to change in their hearts. We have to do this as a collective. It's not just an AFN organization, but all of us as a collective.
Follow up is, when you talk about government, are you talking about the federal government or provincial, or where's the main sticking point?
All governments. All governments are responsible, and municipalities included, cities. First Nations are in every province, every territory, and we have to remind all governments that you are traditionally on First Nations land across this country in a respectful way. We need to get back to our treaty relationship. And these are things that happen from colonization, right? The separation of different peoples, and we need to work better together. Yeah. Any other questions?
Globe and Mail. Hi. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned the Robert Pickton case today and the push to preserve evidence. I know families have called for the evidence to be preserved. Why, to your mind, is that important?
Well, families are calling for that. I know it's been a very raw weekend, and interestingly enough, we had sent a letter last week calling to preserve that evidence because families are calling for that, and many of them haven't had closure yet, and many families never got justice through the entire case. So, I mean, we want to focus on the families, and that is something that the families want, is to have it preserved. And I think that it's important that that discussion happens with those families, not through the courts to try and destroy all this evidence, take that, what little bit maybe they have of their family member away from them. And my heart goes out to the families, and focusing back on the families, and instead of, what they have been focusing on. Yeah.
One of the major themes that came up in the course of the Pickton case was, of course, the response by police, or frankly, the lack thereof. And I'm wondering, in the MMIWG report, that was also a major theme, calls focused on the actions that police need to take. In your view, has there been progress since, the police response, or the lack of police response in the Pickton case, and what would your message be to police forces across the country?
Oh, we could. I wish there would have been, right? I know that in First Nations communities and First Nations people, they continue to see lagging response times. We hear horrific stories across the country of things that maybe could have prevented had there been quicker response times. And we always see a pushback. I know that for sure, as chiefs, we're trying to work with pushing policing forward in this country, and First Nations policing, for instance. And it's almost like there's always wanting to be that stop point of even talking to us about it. But yet policing services and access to police continues to lag behind that of other of the country. And it shouldn't be that way. And we've seen, there's so many tragedies that we can point to. So it hasn't improved, and we're here to try and help, but people have to be willing, other governments need to be willing to come to the table to speak to us in a good way. Thank you.
Can I respond to that too?
Sure.
Just recently in New Brunswick, there's a First Nation. The chief called for a state of emergency. There was a BCR sent to the RCMP to take out the drug dealers out of her community. With not even a year ago, the state of emergency, and within, I believe, 2 to 3 weeks ago, there was a murder by drug dealers in her community. So that goes to show that there's no action. Now, this could have been prevented if they would have taken the action. And this woman was murdered in her home, and it happened to be the chief's sister. So it's just, as the national chief mentioned, horrific stories all across the country.
Thank you. Last question.
Melissa with the Canadian Press. I'm sure that this isn't news. I was at Two-Spirit Powwow in Toronto over the weekend, and obviously you get talking with people. A lot of issues around 2S violence happens in communities by other community members. Same thing with violence against women. What needs to be changed on the person-to-person level in communities, and what can be done on the ground?
Dwayne will answer. Thank you.
All I can say is the Crown and the churches did a very good job of brainwashing our people and indoctrinating our people in intolerance and hate. That when I was gay bashed, it was by other Indigenous people. But where did they learn that from? They learned that in the residential schools when we had the priest telling that the Two-Spirit people are evil, and then they'd be raping the kids at night. So our people have got a mixed up, and it's through trauma. Misunderstanding of and a forgetting of what it means to be Two-Spirit. And I think our people are remembering that once more. And we're taking our place again within our communities. And we see that here with the AFN, with the 2S Plus Council. We see different councils across the country. So we are remembering once again our place, and we're taking our place once again. And the Two-Spirit place is to help all of our people, not just the Two-Spirit, is to help all of our people. A lot of times we're the mediators, we're the bridge. We help bring people together. And so that's why it's an honor to be here today with these amazing leaders and with all of you. So, Chief, miigwech.
Thank you. That concludes, I think, sure.
Fraser,
Go ahead.
APTN News. You mentioned the appointment of an ombudsperson and also oversight body.
Yeah.
Jennifer Moore-Rattray, I think, was appointed to look into this about over January 2023. Have you talked? Has the federal government told you anything about progress on this, or are they close to appointing a person?
I know that Ms. Rattray's like her report. Very congratulations to her as well for doing that hard work. I know that's a lot of hard work to do, but she did a very thorough report. So I want to thank her for that work. I know that she'd focused just on the ombudsperson and not on the other side of it, which is the creation of a table, the tribunal, sorry, focusing on a tribunal. And I think that we have to get to that way. And I think that we urge government to continue to work with us to work towards that and answering that call to action. So.
The other question is, we're about a little over a year out from an election. Of course, the previous government was not in support of this inquiry. Could be a change in government, of course. Are you worried that this might now be these 5 years, or it'll be 6 years, will be an opportunity lost?
I think that we're always, as we see now, like we're thankful for the report that it got done. Took a lot of political will. Like I'd said, 20-something years ago, marching the streets of Winnipeg with 10 people, 15 people, fighting for that report. It took that long to get that report. And now, unfortunately, we're going to have to try and work together to push this country and push politicians. And I encourage all First Nations people, when politicians come to your door at the next election, question them about that. Ask them what they know, because they are going to represent each and every one of us and Canadians. Ask them these hard questions, because if people are wanting to sit in Parliament and in the House of Commons and they aren't prioritizing many of these very important issues and violence against people, that's a problem. And so are we concerned about the next election? Absolutely. Are we going to do our best to make sure that we try to highlight these issues to all political parties? We will do our absolute best. We will work together as First Nations people to work with all Canadians in getting that messaging out and making sure that we try and create better understanding with each other when it comes to how complex these issues are, especially after residential schools, day schools, the 60s scoop, and now unfortunately we're dealing with a really broken child welfare system. I was on the streets this last weekend handing out food, and many of those people are kids that are from the child welfare system. So we're creating broken people through that system, not whole, that aren't connected to our languages, disconnected from our First Nations communities, from our ways of life. And we have to work together to do better and to break down that system. Thank you. Sure.
when we received the report 5 years ago, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Canada has failed the First Nation and, quote, "we will fail you no longer." 5 years later, how do you react to that statement?
Well, it's disheartening, right? I know that we are meeting with a whole bunch of ministers tonight on our First Nations priorities meeting. We will be highlighting this, but at the same time, action needs to happen. And it's written in a report already, and it's unacceptable that only two, and out of, especially in the First Nations priorities, which is how many again, Kelly? First Nation specific? 157 that we really focused on, only two of those. And so it's disheartening to see that and come back to the table. And I know that it's a whole of government approach. It's not one little corner over here. It's got to be a whole of government approach, provinces included and industries included. And so we call on all Canadians to stand with us, read this report, familiarize yourself with it, and let's get working together. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, miigwech.